My son's future sister-in-law looked me straight in the eye and called me a selfish old woman for refusing to make her baby the flower girl. The words hit the air like a slap, sharp enough that even the spoon in my coffee cup stopped clinking. We were sitting around my dining table. Me, my son Michael, his fiancée Jenna, and this woman who had been in my home for less than 10 minutes before deciding she had the authority to rewrite my son's wedding. I kept my fingers around my mug so she wouldn't see them tremble. "What did you say?" "You heard me," she replied, leaning back like she'd been waiting to deliver the blow. "I don't get why you're being so selfish. This is the first miracle baby in the family. She deserves a special place. It's disgusting that you're choosing your son's stepchild over her." Jenna's shoulders tightened. She kept her eyes down on the paper napkin in her hands, twisting it slowly, edges fraying. Michael sat rigid in his chair, jaw working silently. The baby, little Rosie, sat in a high chair by the window, banging a plastic spoon on her tray. A bib with the word "miracle" in gold glitter hung from her neck. The entire room felt held hostage by that word. "I'm not choosing one child over another," I said. "We already promised my granddaughter the flower girl role a year ago." The woman scoffed. "Promises to children don't matter. They don't remember these things. But Emily will. She deserves to see her daughter honored." "She's 2, Michael muttered. The woman turned on him instantly. "And that doesn't make her less meaningful." Jenna lifted her head. "We're not refusing to involve her. She'll be in family photos. We just already gave this role away." "Oh, please," the woman snapped. "Why can't your stepdaughter carry the baby with her? Or why can't you walk the baby down the aisle? Or why can't the stepdaughter step aside? It's not that complicated." I breathed slowly through my nose. I'd lived 60 years on this earth, long enough to recognize when a person walked into a room already convinced they'd been wronged. Nothing would satisfy her except victory. "The answer is no," I said. "Lily has practiced for months. She's excited. We're not taking this from her." The woman laughed, one quick, sharp exhale. "You don't get it. You older women are so obsessed with control. You act like the world revolves around you and your traditions. This is bigger than you. This is about family. This is about what we all went through to bring that child into the world." Jenna flinched. She looked at Michael with pleading eyes, but he was already bracing against the verbal blows. "No one is minimizing what Emily went through," I said. "But your journey doesn't entitle you to push out a 6-year-old child who's already been promised a moment she's dreamed of." "Oh my God," the woman whispered dramatically, pressing a hand to her chest. "You're unbelievable. Do you even care how traumatizing infertility is?" Her voice rose. The spoon in the baby's hand clattered to the floor. The baby frowned, then began to cry, loud, piercing, overwhelmed by the noise and tension. The woman didn't comfort her. She just talked louder. "You're acting like this wedding belongs only to your side of the family. You're making us feel unwelcome. You're making my sister feel invisible. You're ruining this for her." Something hot flared in my chest. Anger, yes, but beneath it something older, something shaped by a lifetime of being blamed for other people's storms. "I won't apologize for keeping a promise to a child," I said quietly. The woman's face twisted. "You should be ashamed. You're showing everyone who you really are." She stood abruptly, knocking the chair backward with a crash. The baby's crying pitched higher. Michael moved to pick her up, but the woman snatched the baby into her arms before he could reach her. "You've made your choice," she spat at me. "When Emily hears how you treated me, she'll finally understand what kind of mother-in-law she's dealing with. And when people find out you didn't want the miracle baby to shine on the wedding day, they'll take our side. Believe me." She stormed toward the door, diaper bag slamming against her hip. The front door opened and closed with a violent crack that rattled the frames on the wall. Then silence, heavy, unnatural, the kind that leaves your ears ringing. Jenna's napkin fell from her fingers onto the table. She pressed trembling hands over her face. Michael stared at the doorway as if expecting the anger to come back in physical form. My kitchen, which had always been a quiet sanctuary, jasmine dish soap by the sink, old blue mixing bowl on the counter, sunlight falling soft across the table, now felt invaded, disrupted. I sat there, letting the echo of the slam door fade. This wasn't about a flower girl, not anymore. And for the first time, a quiet instinct stirred in my chest, a sense that something far more calculated had been set in motion. Something that would not end with today. Michael arrived the next morning looking like he hadn't slept at all. He walked straight into my kitchen, set his phone on the counter, and let out a long breath that sagged his entire frame. The air still felt unsettled from yesterday, like the room was holding its own breath with us. "I guess you've seen the messages by now," he said. I hadn't, but the dread in his voice told me enough. I reached for his phone, and he handed it over without a word. The family group chat was lit up like a bonfire. I can't believe Ruth talked to Kayla like that. After everything Emily went through, shameful. Who denies a miracle baby a role? Lily won't even remember it. Just give the spot to the child who deserves it. Deserves it. As if children earned affection through suffering. As if Lily's existence was somehow less meaningful. I scrolled slowly, reading each line like a bruise forming in real time. No one had asked for my side. They already decided which story made them feel most righteous. When I set the phone down, Michael rubbed a hand through his hair. "This is getting out of control." "Of course it is," I said quietly. "That was the goal." He stared at the floor. "I tried calling Emily last night. She wouldn't answer. Then Kayla texted me saying she was too hurt to speak to me directly. That sounds convenient. And she's telling people you called her dramatic." "I didn't," I said. I stayed calm. They don't want calm. They want martyrdom. He nodded, jaw tightening. "Jenna's been sick all morning. She says she's embarrassed to even show her face at the family dinner next weekend." The ache behind my ribs throbbed. Jenna didn't deserve any of this. She'd been gentle, patient, hopeful. Qualities some people treat like invitations to bulldoze. Before I could respond, a soft shuffle came from the hallway. I turned and saw Lily standing there in her pajamas, holding the stuffed unicorn she'd brought from home. Her hair stuck out in all directions. "Daddy?" she whispered. "Why are you sad?" Michael tried to smile. It didn't land. "I'm okay, sweetheart." She padded into the kitchen and crawled into his lap. He wrapped his arms around her, burying his face in her hair for a moment, then looked at me over her shoulder with eyes that said more than his words ever could. She leaned back and looked between us. "Did I do something wrong?" My breath caught. "No," I said. "You didn't." Her lower lip wobbled. "Mommy said people are fighting about the flower girl. That's me." I exchanged a look with Michael. His expression flinched. Anger, guilt, helplessness, all compressed into 1 second. "It's not your fault," he said softly. "But if I wasn't the flower girl," she said, "would everyone stop being mad?" I felt something inside me go terribly still. The kitchen around us, a room filled with ordinary things like dishes in the sink, a towel drying on the counter, the hum of the fridge, seemed to dim. "No," I said firmly. "People who want to be mad will stay mad no matter what." She looked at me, eyes wide and searching. "I just want everyone to be happy." A child shouldn't have to carry the weight of grown women's insecurities. A child shouldn't feel responsible for adults who weaponize their grief or entitlement, but children always feel the fault first. They bend instinctively. That's how patterns pass from one generation to the next. "Lily," I said, reaching out to smooth her hair, "you didn't make anyone fight. Some grown-ups are making choices they shouldn't be making." She hesitated. "Do they not like me?" My throat tightened. "They don't even know you well enough to decide." She stayed quiet, leaning her head against Michael's chest. Something in the way she curled into him made my heart clench, like she was trying to make herself smaller so the world would stop shaking. She shouldn't have to do that. Not again. Not ever. When she wandered off to the living room to watch cartoons, Michael closed his eyes briefly. This is exactly what I was afraid of. I tried to keep my own voice steady. They're turning a child's joy into leverage. It's cruel, and they know it. He nodded, looking older than he had the right to. People are asking if we're going to change our minds. Even my aunt said Lily is resilient and that Emily deserves this more. Deserves? I repeated. For what? Suffering? Suffering doesn't buy entitlement. He exhaled shakily. I feel like we're being shoved into a corner. You are, I said, but you don't have to stay there. He hesitated. Mom, they're starting to say you're the problem. Of course they were. It wasn't enough to pressure the couple. They needed a villain. And who better than an older woman who refused to bend? I picked up my coffee, took a slow sip, and let the bitterness settle on my tongue. Let them talk, I said. People who want chaos will always aim at whoever stands still. Before he could answer, his phone vibrated again. A new message from a cousin. Emily says she might not come to the wedding unless the baby walks. I don't blame her. I'd feel unwelcome too. He showed it to me, looking defeated. This is spiraling, he said. I feel like no matter what we say or do, someone's twisting it into a new story. Because they want it to spiral, I replied. The more chaotic it gets, the more they can spin themselves as victims. He let out a breath that trembled. I just want a peaceful wedding. I know. He glanced toward the living room where Lily's cartoon laughter rose and fell. It sounded fragile. Jenna texted him then. My mother just asked me whether we're prepared for people to walk out during the ceremony. I feel sick. He placed the phone face down. What are we supposed to do? The answer came without hesitation. We hold the line, I said. All of us. We don't shift because it's easier. We don't bow because someone else cries louder. He looked at me with something like relief, or maybe recognition, of a strength he wasn't used to seeing in me, but needed now. And yet, underneath all of it, I could feel it. Something was building, something quiet and deliberate, something sharpened by whispers in group chats and phone calls behind closed doors. And deep inside, I knew we hadn't seen the worst yet. When the house finally quieted after Michael left, I found myself standing alone in the kitchen, fingers brushing lightly against the old blue mixing bowl sitting on the counter. Its rim was chipped in 2 places. The glaze faded from years of being scrubbed by hand. I used to think I would replace it someday, but the more worn it became, the more it felt like a record of my life, every scrape of a wooden spoon marking some memory of survival. I carried it to the table and sat down, letting its weight settle into my palms. Outside, the wind nudged the porch swing into a slow rhythm, the chains squeaking softly. The scent of jasmine dish soap lingered from the breakfast dishes I'd washed earlier. All these small things, ordinary, familiar, pulled me backward through time, whether I wanted to go there or not. My earliest memories were of trying not to make noise. My mother cooked quietly, moved quietly, loved quietly. She believed that silence kept the peace, and peace in our house meant minimizing how often my father exploded. He worked long hours at the factory and drank longer hours after that. The front door opening at night used to make the hairs on my arms rise. I never knew what version of him would walk in. Once he came home furious over something his supervisor said. He swept an entire set of plates off the dining table with one arm. The crash filled the room, ceramic shattering against the floor, pieces spinning across the linoleum like sharp little truths. My mother knelt immediately, gathering the shards, hands trembling. A piece sliced her thumb. She pressed her lips together so tightly they turned white. I remember standing there, frozen, a broken fragment at my feet. I picked it up and held it in my small hand. My mother looked up at me and shook her head, a tiny, terrified gesture, not a sound, not a word. Keeping quiet was how we survived. I learned early that breathing softly, stepping lightly, and never asking for too much made me easier to love, or at least less likely to be struck by the fallout of someone else's frustration. When I left home at 19, I told myself I would breathe louder, that I would take up space, that I would never again build my life around someone else's anger. Tom came into my world like a promise: steady hands, calm voice, a man who worked hard and didn't carry liquor on his breath. We met by accident in a hardware store. He was trying to decide between two kinds of nails and cracked a joke about everything in life needing a little reinforcement. I laughed. It felt good to laugh in front of a man without worrying he would use the sound against me. We married in a small church that smelled faintly of old carpet and fading hymnals. My dress was borrowed, the reception was potluck, and someone forgot to turn on the fans, so everyone fanned themselves with printed programs. But it was simple, and it was ours. Michael came along 2 years later. The night he was born, the hospital air smelled of disinfectant and fear. He struggled to breathe at first, and the room filled with urgency, nurses calling to each other, machines beeping. When they placed him on my chest, his skin warm and slick, he let out a cry that made my entire body shake with relief. I promised him then, silently, that his life would be nothing like mine had been. We lived in a small rented house with peeling wallpaper and a leaky faucet that groaned whenever we turned it on. Money was always tight. I took whatever work the town offered: grocery store clerk, sewing shifts at the upholstery shop, cleaning houses on weekends. Tom's construction job kept us afloat, but only barely. Still, the house was warm in ways my childhood home never was. Michael filled it with noise, baby giggles, then toddler chatter, then the thumping footsteps of a boy who hadn't learned to walk anywhere when he could run instead. The kitchen was the heart of it. That blue bowl lived on the counter, always ready for pancake batter or mashed potatoes or a birthday cake mixed by hand. Michael used to sit on the counter, dipping his fingers into whatever I was making when he thought I wasn't looking. He'd grin up at me with that mischievous spark in his eyes. "You're going to spoil your dinner," I'd say, pretending to scold. "But it's Grandma approved," he'd insist, even when I told him he had to wait. Those were good years. Exhausting, lean, loud, messy, but good. Then the layoffs came. Tom lost his job after the company downsized. He took it hard, harder than I expected. The first few days he was quiet, withdrawn, sitting at the table with the want ads spread around him. But weeks passed, then months, and the silence curdled. One night, after another rejection email, he punched a hole straight through the bedroom door. The sound fractured the air, jolting me back into a version of myself I thought I'd buried. My ribs tightened. The room spun. Michael, 14 at the time, appeared at the doorway, eyes wide. I stepped in front of him without thinking, a reflex older than my adult life. Tom apologized later, truly, tearfully. But apologies don't erase echoes. The cracks in the door stayed for years. I stared at them every morning while making coffee, tiny splinters reminding me that anger, once unleashed, always left an imprint. But we pushed through. I worked more hours. Tom picked up odd jobs. Michael graduated high school, then community college. We breathed again, carefully, as if afraid the relief might shatter. His first marriage. I should have seen the pattern sooner. His wife had a sharp laugh that turned into a weapon when she was irritated. She criticized him constantly, his clothes, his job, the gifts he bought. She once told me my mashed potatoes were too rustic, and that maybe I should follow a real recipe. At the rehearsal dinner for their wedding, she yelled at me over candle colors. Candle colors. She wanted cream, not ivory, and made sure the entire bridal party witnessed her disappointment in me. I swallowed the humiliation like I'd swallowed so many things before it. My mother's voice echoed through decades. Keep the peace. Don't make it worse. Michael was so young. He wanted to believe love could survive on hope alone. I didn't have the heart to show him my doubts. Then Lily was born. I held her the first time in a hospital room painted soft yellow. She was tiny and warm, her little fist gripping the fabric of my shirt. She smelled like milk and baby powder and possibility. I'd forgotten how small a newborn felt, forgotten how their breath could steady even the wildest parts of you. I became her safe place quickly, not intentionally. Life simply bent that way. Her parents fought often, loudly. Lily would come to me with her backpack half unzipped, hair in tangles, clutching drawings she'd made of stick figures holding hands. "Grandma, can I stay?" she'd ask. I always said yes. When the marriage finally crumbled, it wasn't dramatic. It simply dissolved, like a rope too frayed to hold weight. Michael moved into a small apartment and took Lily on weekends. His ex-wife drifted further into bitterness, calling only when she needed something. I learned to keep snacks in my purse for custody drop-offs, to braid Lily's hair tighter when she'd been crying, to stay quiet when Michael vented about court fees and shared custody calendars. But Lily brought light into the cracks. She'd skip into my kitchen, dragging her little step stool behind her, eager to bake or draw or rearrange the magnets on my fridge. She once drew a picture of me, holding her hand under a rainbow. "That's you," she said. "You're the safe one." The safe one. Those words lodged themselves deep inside me. When Michael met Jenna years later, I watched his shoulders soften whenever she entered the room. She treated Lily with tenderness, not resentment. She never tried to replace the girl's mother, just offered stability where chaos used to live. The first time she came over for dinner, she noticed the chips on my blue bowl and traced the edge with her thumb. "This bowl has been through a lot," she said. "So have I replied. She smiled gently. "I can tell." When they announced their engagement, Lily ran to my house in her sparkly sneakers, breathless with excitement. "Grandma," she said, hands clasped under her chin, "can I be the flower girl? Please, I've always wanted to be one." The answer came so easily. "Of course you can." Her joy illuminated the room. For a moment, everything in my life, every bruise, every sacrifice, every quiet apology, felt like it had led to that single glowing smile. We picked her dress together. She twirled in the mirror at the boutique, layers of tulle floating around her like a cloud. I bought her a little tiara headband, even though she insisted she didn't need it. She practiced tossing imaginary petals in my hallway while humming a song she made up herself. She earned that place long before any invitations were printed, and somewhere in the midst of those sweet preparations of the steady return to hope that weddings are supposed to bring, I forgot one thing. Some people look at joy not as something to celebrate, but as something to conquer. The bowl in my hands felt heavier than ever. The jasmine scent from the sink drifted toward me again, familiar, almost comforting. A reminder of the hours I'd spent in this kitchen trying to wash other people's messes from my life. The wind rattled the porch swing outside. I stood, carried the bowl back to the counter, and brushed the rim with the pad of my thumb. I didn't know then just how deeply the past would entwine itself with the present, how the lessons I thought I had escaped would return in new faces, new battles, how a woman like Kayla could drag old shadows into new rooms with just a few sentences. But sitting there in the quiet of my home, history humming beneath my skin, I felt the beginning of an understanding I would only fully grasp later. Every life has a fault line, and mine was about to rupture. By the end of that week, it felt like my name had become a story other people told about me when I wasn't in the room. It started small, the way these things always do. At the grocery store, I was standing in front of the dairy case comparing yogurt prices when my sister-in-law appeared at my elbow, pretending she'd just happened to run into me. Her cart was half full of things for a cookout: burger buns, soda, a watermelon with a sticker still on it. She smiled too tightly. "There you are," she said. "I've been meaning to talk to you." My fingers tapped against the cold handle of the fridge. "Is that so?" She leaned in, voice dropping low so other shoppers couldn't hear. I spoke with Emily last night. She cried through half the call. She feels completely humiliated. I kept my eyes on the yogurt. That wasn't my intention. Well, intentions don't erase feelings, she said. She told me you shut her sister down in your own house, that you refused to even consider letting the baby walk. We already promised, I began. She cut me off with a quick flick of her hand. You and your promises. Children are flexible. Adults aren't. You could have been a little more compassionate. There it was. The first sting, not an argument, a judgment. I am compassionate, I said. I'm also not in the habit of teaching 6-year-olds that adults can snatch their joy away whenever they want. She exhaled through her nose, an impatient sound. You're making this very dramatic. It's a wedding, not a war. Honestly, at your age, I'd expect more wisdom. That line landed like a slap I wasn't supposed to acknowledge. At your age. I stood there under the fluorescent lights, surrounded by rows of dairy products, being scolded like a child. Is that all? I asked. For now. She patted my arm lightly as if reassuring a difficult patient. You still have time to do the right thing. She pushed her cart away, leaving me there feeling like the entire aisle had watched me be put in my place. Later that afternoon, Michael came by and showed me the latest round of messages on his phone. My name flashed over and over in gray bubbles. She thinks she's in charge of everything. She's using Lily to control the wedding. She's never liked Emily. This is what happens when older women can't let go. I scrolled slowly, looking at each sentence like another stone added to a pile I never asked to carry. Some relatives I hadn't heard from in months were suddenly weighing in, offering opinions based on a single version of the story. They're not even asking what actually happened, Michael said. They just assume. That's easier, I replied. They get to feel righteous without doing any work. That night, Jenna sat at my kitchen island, elbows on the counter, head in her hands. A half-eaten granola bar lay on the plate in front of her, untouched for an hour. My mother called, she said. She asked if I've thought about apologizing to keep the peace. I let out a humorless breath. Apologizing for what? For causing tension, Jenna whispered. She thinks brides are supposed to bring families together. She said this drama is making me look immature. She lifted her head. Her eyes were red from crying. I haven't done anything except try to honor a promise we made before Rosie was even born. You haven't done anything wrong, I said. People just like to blame the person who refuses to bend. She swallowed. I'm starting to wonder if we should just elope, leave them all to fight over an empty church. The fact that she said it without smiling told me everything I needed to know about how heavy this had become. The next morning, I woke up to a notification on my phone. Kayla had posted a long paragraph on social media. No names, but every detail pointed straight at us. Some people think their control matters more than a mother's healing. Some people worship tradition so much they're willing to crush a miracle child's moment to keep power. Infertility trauma is real. Stop dismissing it. The comments came fast. People like that make me sick. Cut them out of your life. Older women with control issues are the worst. Protect your sister and your niece. No one tagged me. No one had to. I could feel the circle tightening. By midday, another blow landed. I was folding dish towels when the phone rang. The caller ID showed the name of our pastor. Hello, Pastor, I greeted, smoothing the towel with my free hand. He cleared his throat on the other end. Hello, Ruth. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. Not at all. Is everything okay? Well, he said slowly, I had a visit this morning from Emily and her sister. They're very distressed about the situation with the wedding. Of course they were. They said there's been tension, he continued, that they feel excluded and judged. They're concerned that the ceremony won't be a welcoming environment for their child. My grip tightened on the towel. Pastor, we simply kept a promise we made to my granddaughter. We never said the baby couldn't be involved at all. I understand, he said. These situations are delicate. Emotions run high. Have they told you I spoke calmly? I asked. That I didn't raise my voice, insult them, or throw anyone out? Or just that they didn't get their way? He was quiet for a moment. They feel very hurt, he repeated. Of course, feelings were the only currency that seemed to matter these days. I would just encourage you, he said gently, to consider whether there is any room for grace. Weddings are an opportunity for healing. Sometimes that requires sacrifice from those who've been around longer. There it was again. A smile wrapped around a knife. Those who've been around longer. Step aside, old woman. Make room. I've spent my entire life sacrificing, I said before I could stop myself. I'm not sure that asking me to undo a promise to a child is grace. He cleared his throat again. I don't want to get in the middle. I just hope we can avoid any unpleasantness on the day. When I hung up, my hand shook slightly, not from shock, from the familiar sensation of standing alone in a story other people thought they understood. Later that day, my sister called. I heard you upset the pastor, she said, skipping past any greeting. What's going on, Ruth? I didn't upset him, I replied. He got a curated version of events. She sighed. You know how fragile Emily is. And Kayla, well, she's protective. Protective, I echoed. Is that what we're calling it? She just doesn't want her sister hurt anymore. Losing babies changes a person. You of all people should understand that. I closed my eyes for a moment. There it was, the assumption that I'd never known loss simply because I hadn't turned mine into a stage. I do understand grief, I said quietly. I also understand boundaries. Well, right now it looks like stubbornness, she replied. People are starting to say you've lost perspective. This is one walk down the aisle. It's not worth all this. Not worth all this. As if I were the one whipping it into a frenzy. That weekend, there was a family birthday party for my nephew at my niece's house. A small gathering with balloons tied to the mailbox and kids running around the yard. I almost didn't go, but not going would have been its own statement. So I baked a cake in the blue bowl, carried it carefully, and walked up the driveway like everything was normal. Inside, conversations dimmed when I stepped through the door. Not dramatically. No one gasped. But I felt eyes land on me, then slide away. People shifted, formed little islands. My niece hugged me quickly, already looking past my shoulder. Glad you could make it, Aunt Ruth, she said, then moved on to greet someone else. I put the cake down in the kitchen and poured myself some lemonade. As I stood at the counter, my cousin drifted over, pretending to examine the paper plates. So, she said, how are things with the wedding? I kept my voice even. Stressful, as you've probably heard. She nodded. I just think it's sad. All this over a role that the kid won't even remember. She remembers now, I replied. She's been practicing for months. It already matters. My cousin shrugged. Well, Emily went through so much. If it were me, I'd step aside. Let the miracle baby have the spotlight. That's what family is about. That's one definition, I said. From the dining room, I heard someone murmur, I just don't understand why she's digging in her heels, followed by a sympathetic hum. Later, while I was cutting the cake, one of the younger women in the family, someone I barely knew, laughed loudly at something on her phone and said, just loud enough, some people really shouldn't be in charge of anything important when they're that controlling. Two of her friends looked at me, then quickly looked away. Heat crept up the back of my neck. No one said my name. No one had to. The room had already decided where to place the blame. On the drive home, the late afternoon sun flickered through the trees, strobing across the windshield. I felt hollow, scraped out. I'd spent my whole life hoping that if I did enough, gave enough, swallowed enough, I would earn the benefit of the doubt. Instead, one refusal had turned me into the villain of half a dozen private narratives. That night, alone in my living room, I sat on the edge of the couch and listened to the house breathe. The tick of the hallway clock, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the squeak of the porch swing outside nudged by the wind. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. A message from an unknown number. If you're planning to make the wedding uncomfortable, maybe you should let someone else handle things. Nobody wants a bitter atmosphere on such a special day. No greeting, no name. The tone was unmistakable. Another message came seconds later from a relative. Kayla says she's not sure they'll come if things don't change. She doesn't feel safe around all this hostility. Hostility. The word sat on my tongue like something sour. I put the phone down and pressed my palms against my thighs, feeling the veins beneath the skin. This was more than conflict. It was a slow erasure. Every story they told about me rewrote who I was allowed to be in this family. And through it all, the same thought kept pushing its way to the surface, no matter how much I tried to push it back down. If they were willing to do this much damage before the wedding, what exactly were they planning to do when all of us were trapped in one room with an audience? The breaking point didn't arrive with shouting or slam doors. It came quietly, the way a hairline crack spreads through glass long before it shatters. I woke early that morning, the sky still dim, a soft bluish gray pressing against the windows. I had barely slept. My body felt heavy, as if carrying someone else's exhaustion. I stepped into the kitchen and turned on the coffee maker, listening to its familiar gurgle. For a moment, that sound grounded me. Then my phone buzzed on the counter, a text from my sister. I heard they're planning to show up late to the rehearsal dinner as a statement. You should prepare yourself. People are talking. Another notification followed, this time a screenshot from a cousin. Someone had posted anonymously in a local wedding forum. What would you do if the groom's mother refused to honor a miracle baby and created a toxic environment for the bride's family? Should we boycott the event? More comments beneath it. What a monster. People like that ruin families. She sounds jealous of the attention the baby gets. I stood still, fingers cold around the phone. There was no room left for misunderstanding. No more pretending this was a disagreement among relatives. This was a campaign, organized, relentless, public. Someone wanted me punished. The coffee maker clicked off, but I didn't move to pour a cup. A sharp knock hit the front door. When I opened it, Jenna stood there with her coat half-zipped, hair pulled into a messy bun. Her eyes were swollen, like she'd been crying for hours but had run out of tears. "Can I come in?" she whispered. I stepped aside. She walked to the living room like someone carrying a fragile weight inside her chest. She didn't sit right away. Instead, she stood near the bookshelf, fingers brushing one of the framed photos. Lily at the park, laughing on a swing while I pushed her from behind. "They reached out to my ex-mother-in-law," she said softly. She texted me this morning asking if I knew people were saying we're using my daughter for attention. Her voice broke on the last word. I felt the air in the room shift, something tightening, pulling inward. "They messaged your ex?" I asked. She nodded, swallowing. "They're trying to embarrass me. They want to paint me as some sort of unstable stepmother, forcing Lily into a role that doesn't belong to her." She pressed the heel of her hand against her forehead. "I don't know how to protect her from this." A quiet settled between us, heavy and fragile. She lowered herself onto the couch. "Last night, Lily asked me if she should practice less because maybe someone else deserves the job more." Her voice cracked. "She's 6. She shouldn't be thinking like that." My heart squeezed. No, she shouldn't. She told me she heard someone on the phone saying the miracle baby should shine because Lily already has 2 homes and shouldn't be greedy. Jenna shook her head. She doesn't even understand what that means. She just knows it hurt. I sat beside her, hands folded tightly in my lap. "This isn't about a flower girl. It never was." "No," she whispered. "It's about control and humiliation and forcing us to bow to their narrative." Her breaths came shallow. Michael wants to confront them. I told him not to. They'll twist it. They always twist it. And what do you want? I asked. She looked at me with something raw in her expression. Fear, but also exhaustion so deep it bordered on despair. I want my daughter to feel special at her own father's wedding, she said. I want her to walk down the aisle with pride, not wondering if grown adults hate her for existing. I exhaled slowly, the weight in my chest shifting into something colder, something more defined. She hesitated. I'm afraid they're going to do something at the wedding, a scene, a speech, something planned to embarrass us in front of everyone. Her eyes met mine, and I'm afraid we won't be ready when they do. A long silence stretched between us, but it wasn't empty. It was full of realization, quiet, dangerous realization. My hands curled slightly, nails pressing into my palms. All my life I had survived by minimizing myself, by stepping aside, by enduring, by making room for other people's storms. But this moment, this woman beside me, trembling for the sake of a child who adored her, pressed against a memory I rarely let surface. The night my own mother knelt on the floor gathering broken plates with trembling hands. The moment I promised myself I would never let someone else's cruelty define the world my family lived in. Not again. Not this time. I stood slowly from the couch. My reflection in the window caught my eye. Older, lined, tired, but something steadier than I'd seen in years. Jenna watched me rise. "What are you thinking?" I didn't answer at first. I walked to the kitchen counter, rested my hand on the chipped rim of the blue mixing bowl, and felt an old truth return to me like a pulse. There is a point in every woman's life when survival is no longer enough. A moment when protecting others matters more than keeping the peace. A moment when fear loses its power because the alternative, silence, is finally unbearable. I turned back to Jenna. "They've pushed far enough," I said quietly. "Too far." Her lips parted, not in surprise, but in recognition, like she'd been waiting for someone else to say it out loud. "What do we do?" she asked. The answer came with absolute clarity. "We stop absorbing their blows," I said, "and we start preparing for the truth to defend itself." Outside, the wind rattled the porch swing, a hollow clink of chain against metal. Inside, everything in me settled into place with a certainty I hadn't felt in decades. The next move would be mine, and they would never see it coming. That night, long after Jenna left, I sat alone at the dining table with a notebook and a pen, two objects I hadn't used together in years. The house was quiet except for the faint ticking of the hallway clock and the whisper of wind pushing gently against the windows. The porch swing creaked every so often, its chains moving like an old memory refusing to settle. I opened the notebook to a blank page. My handwriting looked unsteady at first. The letters stretched and awkward, like I was waking up a part of myself that had been asleep for too long. But once the pen touched the page, a calmness settled through me, a kind I hadn't felt in weeks. I wrote the date, then I wrote one line, what they say and what really happened. It was a beginning, and beginnings are powerful things. I listed the events in order, who said what, who twisted what, who inserted themselves where they didn't belong. I wrote down every moment Kayla had raised her voice, every accusation she'd thrown, every message that had circulated through the family. Not the emotional color of those events, just the facts, cold, simple, unarguable. It felt like building a spine out of bone that no one could bend. When the page filled, I turned to the next, and the next. By the fourth page, my hand no longer trembled. At 8 the next morning, Michael stopped by. He looked more rested than before, but there was something hardened in his expression now, a quiet resolve that mirrored my own. "I couldn't sleep," he said. "I kept thinking about what Jenna told you yesterday." I pulled the notebook closer. "Then we should stop giving them room to rewrite this." He sat across from me. "What do you mean?" Instead of answering, I slid the notebook toward him. He read in silence, flipping through each page slowly, jaw tightening with every line. When he closed it, he exhaled sharply. They're going to lose it if they ever see this. That's not my concern, I said. My concern is making sure they don't get to control the story. He rubbed his temples. I think we need a plan. We do, I replied, and it starts with documentation. He nodded. Jenna's been saving the messages from her ex-mother-in-law. Should she print them? Yes. And the posts from the forum? Yes. He hesitated. Do you really think they're aiming to ruin the wedding? They've already started, I said. They're not simply angry, they're building momentum, and people who want public sympathy rarely stop until they get an audience. He sank back in his chair. So what do we do? Not fight back? We don't fight, I said. We prepare. Fighting is what they want. Preparation is what they won't expect. His shoulders eased slightly, not from relief, more from recognition that something had shifted, that we were no longer reacting, but quietly organizing ourselves. Should we talk to the pastor again? He asked. Not yet, not until we understand the full reach of their influence. He nodded slowly, thinking. Later that afternoon, I drove to the craft store on the edge of town, not for anything dramatic, just a binder, dividers, and clear plastic sleeves. The cashier didn't make eye contact, tapping buttons on the register while a radio station hummed in the background. The everyday normalcy of it almost felt surreal. At home, I spread everything on the dining table. The binder snapped open with a clean click. I began sliding pages inside, my notes, screenshots Jenna sent, printouts from Michael. Document by document, I watched something take shape. Not a weapon, a record. My hands moved with steady precision. At one point, I paused, staring at the blue mixing bowl sitting on the counter. I'd washed it after breakfast, its chipped rim catching the light from the window. It had survived so many seasons of my life without breaking. I found comfort in its stubbornness. I turned back to the binder. Around 5 p.m, the doorbell rang. Jenna stood there holding an envelope. Her hands trembled slightly. I think you should see this, she said. Inside the envelope were printed messages, long threads between Emily and several relatives, lines circled in blue pen, accusations that had grown even more embellished, claims that I'd called the baby irrelevant, that I'd mocked their infertility journey, that I'd said the wedding would be better without them. None of it true. None of it even close. Jenna lowered herself into a chair. Who talks like this about their own family? I don't recognize these people. People reveal themselves when they believe they're being applauded, I said. She pushed a hand through her hair, looking overwhelmed. I'm scared. I don't want them near Lily if this is how they behave. They'll use her as ammunition. A protective instinct rose inside me, sharp, clear, familiar. They won't get the chance. As we spoke, the porch swing outside rocked again, its chain rattling against the post. The wind wasn't strong enough to move it that way. For a moment, I wondered if someone had been sitting there earlier, listening, watching. But no one was outside when I checked. Still, the feeling lingered, a quiet unease in the walls. After Jenna left, I returned to the binder. I added the new messages behind a tab labeled simply Statements. Not accusations, not evidence, just statements. Things they had said in their own words. Around 8 p.m., the phone rang again. It was the pastor. His voice was polite, but there was a tension beneath it. Ruth, I've spoken again with Emily. She insists you're creating a hostile environment. She said she may need to reevaluate her involvement in the wedding. I see. She also mentioned feeling unsafe, he continued. I want to be sure we're not allowing conflict to overshadow the meaning of this event. Unsafe. That word again, repeated like a chant, a way to weaponize sympathy while shifting blame. I appreciate your concern, I said. When you're ready to hear the full version of events, I can provide it. He hesitated. I'm not looking to take sides. "I'm not asking you to," I said. "I'm asking you to not accept a story before hearing the truth." His silence stretched. "I'll keep that in mind," he said finally. When we hung up, I stared at the wall for a long time. Something had crystallized inside me. Not anger, not hurt, but a quiet strength I hadn't leaned on in years. Preparation is not aggression. Preparation is clarity. And clarity was something they had never expected from a woman they assumed would simply bow her head and endure. The next day, I made a list. People to speak with privately, documents to print, behaviors to observe, moments that needed to be recorded, not to expose them yet, not to confront, but to understand the shape of the storm moving toward us. As I wrote, a message blinked on my phone. From an unknown number. "I heard you're building a case. Careful what you dig up. You might not like what comes out." I read it twice, letting the words settle. Someone knew. Someone was watching. I didn't reply. I saved the message, printed it, slid it into the binder. Then I closed the cover and rested my hand on top, feeling the cool smoothness of it under my palm. Nothing about this wedding would be simple anymore, but I was no longer walking blind, no longer absorbing every blow, no longer waiting for their next move without preparing my own. The truth was assembling itself, piece by piece, quietly, patiently, and as the wind brushed against the porch swing once more, an eerie, deliberate sound, I understood something with a clarity that steadied every part of me. They were planning something for the wedding, but so was I. The church smelled like lilies and candle wax, the kind of scent that usually made me think of Easter and baptisms and beginnings. Sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows, painting soft colors over the aisle runner. The musicians were playing something gentle, a piano and violin weaving together in the background, while guests murmured and shuffled in their seats. I stood near the front with the pastor, smoothing my dress for the third time. My fingers kept drifting to the small binder tucked under the end of the first pew, hidden behind a floral arrangement where only I knew it sat. Insurance, I thought. Not a weapon, just the truth, bound in plastic sleeves. People filed in with that mix of excitement and curiosity that clings to weddings. My sister slid into a pew on the left, avoiding my eyes. A few cousins gave me tight smiles from a distance. Others didn't look at me at all. On the right side, I spotted them. Emily came in first, holding the baby, dressed in pale blue, eyes already shining with tears. Not the soft kind, the loaded ones. The kind that say, "Look what you've done to me," before anyone said a word. Behind her, Kayla walked with her shoulders back and chin lifted, like she was stepping onto a stage. Her dress was just barely more formal than anyone else's, her lipstick a shade too bright for a daytime ceremony. She scanned the room, taking in who was watching. When her gaze passed over me, she smiled, a small, icy curve of her mouth that never reached her eyes. They sat on the groom's side about halfway back, not in the family row reserved for close relatives, but not far enough to disappear. Strategic. Close enough to be seen, far enough to retreat if needed. The music shifted. A hush rippled through the space. Jenna's mother took her seat, dabbing at her eyes. The pastor gave me a small nod. The ceremony began. The groomsmen walked in, then Michael, standing at the front in a suit that suddenly made him look more like a man than the boy I still sometimes saw in my mind. His eyes swept the crowd for a moment, found mine, and held there just long enough for me to nod. "I'm here," I tried to say without words. "I've got you." Then the moment came. The doors at the back opened. Lily stepped into the doorway, holding her small white basket, pink dress swaying around her knees. The little tiara headband we'd chosen together sparkled softly under the lights. For a second, she looked smaller than I remembered, framed by the tall archway. Then she saw Michael. Her face bloomed into a smile so wide it almost hurt to look at. She took a careful step forward, then another, scattering petals in small, deliberate handfuls. The entire room seemed to lean in. People smiled, whispered, reached for phones. She moved slowly, like the aisle was a dream she didn't want to wake from too quickly. I glanced at Emily. Her jaw was clenched, knuckles white around the baby's blanket. Tears were already sliding down her cheeks, not from joy, from something else. Kayla's eyes, though, were dry and sharp, tracking every petal that fell. When Lily passed their row, Emily looked down at her own child, too young to understand any of this, and then back at the aisle. Her shoulders hitched, and that's when it happened. As Lily reached the front, Kayla stood up. The creak of the pew echoed louder than it should have. The music faltered for half a second before recovering. All eyes near the middle of the church shifted toward her as she stepped out into the aisle, lifting a hand like she had a right to command the room. "Stop," she said, voice ringing out just clear enough to carry. The musician's fingers stuttered on the keys. The violin bow hung in the air. Lily froze, 1 foot mid-step, a pedal pinched between her fingers. Time slowed. Even the air felt thicker. Michael's entire face changed. He took a half step forward from where he stood at the altar. The pastor stiffened beside him. Kayla walked down the aisle a few paces, stopping near the center, exactly where everyone could see her. She turned, not to Michael, not to Jenna, but to the gathered guests. "I'm sorry," she said, voice trembling in a way that didn't reach her eyes. "I just can't pretend everything is fine." A murmur rolled through the church like distant thunder. She placed a hand over her heart. "Some of you know what my sister has gone through. The years of treatments, the losses, the grief, the miracle of this little girl even being alive." She gestured toward the baby in Emily's arms. And yet, somehow, her own family has chosen to push her aside, to make her feel small, to deny her any place of honor on this day. My heart pounded, loud enough that I could hear it in my ears. Emily began to cry harder, burying her face in the baby's hair. People turned to look at her with immediate sympathy. "You're really doing this," Michael breathed under his breath. Kayla continued, voice gaining strength as she sensed the room's attention locking onto her. "We begged for understanding, for compassion, for just one gesture that said this family sees our pain and values our miracle. We were told no. We were told a promise to a stepchild mattered more than the healing of a real mother's heart." My hand closed unconsciously around the edge of the pew. Real mother. Lily stood at the end of the aisle, petals clutched in her hand, eyes wide and confused, looking between Kayla and her father, her little shoulders hunched inward. Kayla's gaze landed on her. "Sweetheart, it's not your fault," she said, with a gentle tone so at odds with everything she'd done. "You're just a child caught in the middle." Lily's lower lip trembled. That was enough. I stepped into the aisle. "Sit down, Kayla," Michael said, voice taut. "Right now." "I will not," she replied, turning toward him. "Not when everyone here needs to know what your mother has done." My mother. There it was. The target finally named in the open. Brows furrowed in the crowd. I could feel people shifting, mouths tightening, minds beginning to tilt in the direction she was pushing. I walked past Lily slowly, my hand brushing her shoulder as I moved forward. "Keep going, sweetheart," I whispered. "You're doing perfectly." She looked at me, searching my face for some anchor in the chaos. I gave her one small nod. She took a shaky breath and stepped aside to stand near Michael, clutching her basket like a lifeline. I stopped a few feet from Kayla. "If you wanted to talk," I said quietly, "you had plenty of chances to do it without an audience." Her laugh was brittle. "Of course you'd say that. You're good at keeping things behind closed doors. You've been doing it for weeks." "Kayla," the pastor interjected gently, "this isn't the time." "With all due respect, Pastor," she said, turning toward him, "you told us weddings are a time for truth and healing. That's all I'm trying to do." He opened his mouth, then closed it, too cautious to wade into the mud just yet. She faced the guests again. "We were made to feel like outsiders," she continued, "like our child was an inconvenience. We were told our grief was excessive, our story repetitive, our miracle an annoyance. We were told this isn't about us." Her eyes found mine again, because some people think they own this family, that they can decide who matters and who doesn't. The room was utterly still. I heard someone sniffle. Another person muttered, "That's terrible." I could feel the wave of opinion beginning to tilt, a familiar pattern. Cry first, claim pain, make the first declaration, and the room will almost always fall on your side, unless someone stops it. I took a breath. "Are you done?" I asked. A few heads turned sharply toward me. Kayla's eyes narrowed. "No, I'm not, because you haven't even acknowledged what you've done. You haven't apologized. You haven't made it right. You've just dug your heels in and forced your son to choose between his mother's pride and his niece's worth." Behind her, Emily sobbed into a tissue, the baby squirming in her arms. A couple of relatives turned in their seats to give me looks of open disapproval. I felt the old instinct rise, the urge to back down, to diffuse, to shrink so the explosion wouldn't hit the people I loved. But then I saw Lily's face. She stood at the front, staring at the floor, little shoulders drawn tight. She looked like she wanted to disappear. No, not this time. I walked to the front pew and reached behind the floral arrangement, pulling out the binder. The plastic cover caught the light as I carried it back into the aisle. Kayla's eyes flicked to it, confusion flashing for the first time. "What is that?" she demanded. I stopped where everyone could see me, between her and the couple at the altar, but slightly closer to the guests, facing both sides of the church. The binder felt solid in my hands. My voice, when it came, surprised even me with how steady it sounded. "This," I said, "is what's actually been happening." A ripple went through the room. Kayla scoffed. "Oh, please, what? You're going to read us your diary?" "No." I opened the binder and slid out a printed page. "I'm going to read your words." Her confidence faltered. "2 weeks ago," I said, glancing down, "you wrote to a friend. We can stand up during the ceremony and walk out. People will absolutely take our side." I lifted my gaze. "That's what this is, isn't it? Not healing, not truth, a performance you planned in advance." Eyes in the pews widened. A few guests leaned forward. "That's taken out of context," she snapped. "You're twisting—" I held up a hand. "I haven't twisted anything. I printed it exactly as you sent it. I have the full thread, all of it, every word." I turned another page. "Here's the anonymous post from the wedding forum asking if people should boycott the event because the groom's mother is a monster who refuses to honor a miracle baby." Word for word, including the detail about the stepchild being used for attention. I scanned the crowd. Funny thing, that exact phrase then started showing up in family group chats, almost like someone was copy-pasting from their own post. Murmurs swelled. People shifted in their seats. Someone near the back whispered, "Wait, what?" Kayla's face reddened. "You went snooping through my private conversations?" "No," I said. "You went broadcasting. To cousins, to friends, to people outside this family. You dragged strangers into a private matter and painted yourself as a victim before any of us had spoken a word in public. I simply decided not to let your version be the only one left standing." I flipped a few more pages. "Here's the message you sent from an unknown number. If you want us at the wedding, you'll rethink your decision. No one wants to celebrate under the shadow of your bitterness." "That's not grief speaking. That's a threat." Emily shifted uncomfortably in her seat, tears slowing as she looked between us. I set that page aside and lifted my gaze again. "You told our pastor I created a hostile environment and made your sister feel unsafe. You left out the part where you showed up in my home and called me a selfish old woman for keeping a promise to a 6-year-old. gasps, small but distinct, rose from different corners of the room. Kayla's mouth opened, then snapped shut. I stepped a little closer, not enough to crowd her, but enough that she had to tilt her chin up to meet my eyes. "Do you know who actually wasn't safe?" I asked, voice low but clear. "Lily, a little girl who overheard grown women calling her greedy, who asked if she should give up her place so you would stop being mad." A heavy silence descended. "She stood in my bedroom a few days ago and asked if she was making everyone miserable," I continued. "She offered to step aside so your niece could have her moment, because she thought that would make you happy." My throat tightened, but I forced the words out anyway. "You took your anger at me and at life and at every loss you've ever suffered, and you hung it around a child's neck like a weight. You made her believe she was the problem. That is not protectiveness. That is cruelty." Kayla's eyes were bright now, not with grief, but with rage. "How dare you?" she hissed. "You have no idea what my sister has been through." "Actually, I know more than you think." My voice softened, but I didn't look away. Loss doesn't excuse cruelty. Pain doesn't give you permission to rewrite an entire family around your suffering. I looked out at the guests, letting my gaze move slowly across familiar faces. "I have never once told anyone not to love that baby," I said. "I have never said she doesn't matter. I have held her, bought her gifts, prayed for her health. What I did do was refuse to erase a promise made to a child who has already lost more than she should have." I glanced at Lily. Her eyes were locked on me now, wide and wet, basket still clutched to her chest. "I will not teach her that the loudest, saddest grown-up always gets their way," I said. "I will not show her that her joy is negotiable, not for anyone." The church was so quiet I could hear the faint buzz of the overhead lights. Kayla's voice, when it came, was shrill. "You're twisting everything. You're making me look like the bad guy." "You did that work yourself," I replied. "I'm simply holding up the mirror." She looked wildly toward Emily. "Are you going to let her talk to me like this, after everything I've done for you?" All eyes shifted to Emily. She sat rigid in the pew, shoulders shaking. For a long, awful moment, she said nothing. Then slowly, she turned her face toward her sister. "Did you really post about boycotting the wedding?" she asked, voice faint. "Did you really write those things about the groom's mother online?" Kayla faltered. Emily, you know how upset I've been. I was just venting. I was trying to protect you. By dragging my doctors, my miscarriages, my fertility treatments into every conversation," Emily's voice cracked, "by making everything about my pain so you could attack people." Tears fell again, but they were different now, less show, more raw. I didn't know you said all that," she whispered. "I just thought they didn't care." Kayla reached for her hand. "They don't care. That's what I've been trying to tell you. Look at her." She jabbed a finger toward me. "She's standing here with a binder like this is some kind of trial." I lifted the binder slightly. "I didn't bring this to attack you. I brought it because I knew this would happen, because you warned people you were going to make a spectacle out of this ceremony if you didn't get your way. I decided not to let you tear my son's wedding apart without anyone knowing the full story." I turned to the pastor. "You wanted healing, Pastor. Healing doesn't come from pretending abuse is love. It comes from naming what's been done and refusing to let it keep happening." He looked between us, face pale. "I didn't realize the extent of what's been going on." "No," I said. "You didn't. Because some of us were raised never to make scenes, to keep peace at any cost, to quietly accept being the villain in someone else's story if it meant avoiding a public fight." I straightened my shoulders. "I'm done with that." The words hung there, simple and bare. You could feel the room recalibrating, not all at once. People don't rewrite their opinions in a heartbeat, but something shifted. Eyes that had looked at me with suspicion now held uncertainty. Eyes that had looked at Kayla with automatic sympathy now flickered with doubt. Kayla's jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle jumping. "This is unbelievable," she spat. "You're turning everyone against me on your son's wedding day. Congratulations, Ruth. You finally get to be the hero in your own story." I took a breath. "I don't need to be the hero," I said. "I just refuse to be your scapegoat." My gaze slid to Emily again. "I am truly sorry for everything you went through to have your daughter," I said. "I can't imagine that kind of pain. I wanted to celebrate her with you, but I will not apologize for loving my granddaughter enough to keep my word to her. That's not cruelty. That's what love looks like when it stops letting itself be walked on." Silence. Thick. Heavy. Waiting. Someone near the front cleared their throat. Another person whispered, "She has a point." Michael stepped forward finally, voice steady. "This is our wedding," he said, looking from Kayla to Emily to the rest of the room. "Jenna and I made decisions together. My mother didn't force us. She supported us. If anyone here feels they can't be part of this day unless a 2-year-old takes a role from a 6-year-old who's been dreaming of it for a year, then you are free to leave." The words dropped like stones into still water, sending ripples through every row. He glanced at me, then at Lily. "But if you stay," he continued, "you will respect my daughter. You will not punish her for boundaries we set as adults. You will not use her as collateral in your grief." Jenna, standing at the entrance with her bouquet, met his eyes with a look that was equal parts relief and gratitude. For a long moment, no one moved. Kayla's chest rose and fell rapidly. Her eyes darted around the room, measuring, calculating, looking for faces that matched her outrage. What she found instead were uncertain expressions, averted gazes, a few people studying the binder in my hands. The power she'd counted on, the instant wave of sympathy, had stalled. And suddenly, without the current of the room to carry her, she looked smaller, still dangerous, but smaller. I held her gaze. "All that anger," I said softly enough that only nearby Rose could hear. "And you chose to aim it at the easiest target. You could have gone to therapy, to God, to your own mirror. Instead, you chose to punish a child." Her lips trembled, for the first time with something that might have been shame. Or maybe it was just shock at realizing the script hadn't played out the way she'd imagined. For the first time since she stood up, she seemed unsure what to do next. And as the entire church waited, breath held, watching her decide whether to sit down quietly or finish detonating her own reputation in front of everyone, I felt it. The moment when everything would either break apart completely or finally begin to turn. The room slowly exhaled, as if the church itself had been holding its breath alongside us. Kayla stood frozen in the aisle, eyes darting between faces that no longer reflected the support she expected. Her expression flickered, anger, disbelief, something wounded and sharp. But the performance that had carried her this far no longer had an audience willing to applaud. Emily shifted in her seat. The baby squirmed in her lap, tugging lightly at her necklace. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, tired, frayed at the edges. "Kayla, please sit down." Kayla turned toward her, startled. "Emily, don't—" "Please," she repeated. "Not today." The weight of those 2 words settled over the aisle like dust finally beginning to fall. Kayla swallowed, realizing the room was no longer hers to command. For a moment, I thought she might argue again, lash out, escalate, try to salvage the narrative she had built. But something in Emily's face made her pause. Something in the hush of the room made her reevaluate the ground beneath her feet. Without another word, she stepped back into her row and sat beside her sister, arms stiff, jaw clenched. Emily leaned away slightly, the space between them louder than any outburst. The pastor cleared his throat with care. "Let us return to the ceremony." Michael reached for Lily's hand. She looked up at him, uncertain, still clutching her basket tightly. He bent down and whispered something soft. I couldn't hear the words, but whatever he said steadied her. She nodded, straightened her shoulders, and walked the final few steps to her mark with the quiet dignity of someone much older than 6. When she arrived beside Jenna, the bride knelt down and cupped Lily's cheeks gently. "You did perfect," she whispered. "Absolutely perfect." Lily's eyes shone, and a small smile broke through the fear that had been lingering there. The music resumed. The guests slowly settled. Conversations dimmed into silence. The ceremony proceeded. Vows were spoken with trembling emotion. Rings exchanged. Hands joined. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, the applause came slowly at first, then fuller, warmer, a wave of release washing through the room. But beneath the celebration, there was a quiet shift, something subtle but permanent, a recalibration of truth. After the recessional, I stepped into the lobby to catch my breath. The stained glass light fell over the floor in colored patches. People milled around, talking in low voices. A few approached cautiously. My sister came first. She touched my arm lightly. "I didn't know the whole story," she said. Her voice held something like remorse. "I only heard bits. I should have asked you." "It's all right," I replied. And in that moment, it truly felt all right, because she wasn't making excuses or minimizing or asking me to shrink to make anyone comfortable. She was simply acknowledging what she hadn't seen. Next came a cousin who'd barely spoken to me in months. She cleared her throat. Well, that was something. Then softer, "I'm sorry if I misjudged." People don't often apologize directly, but sometimes they offer small admissions that mean more than the words themselves. A few others approached, some awkward, some sincere. Not everyone. Some kept their distance, unwilling to rewrite their opinions so quickly. That was fine. True change rarely sweeps through a crowd all at once. What mattered most was the quiet, growing recognition that the story wasn't as simple as it had been made out to be. Across the room, I saw Emily standing apart from her sister. She shifted the baby from one hip to the other, staring at the floor. She looked smaller than she had earlier, less performative, more real. After a long hesitation, she walked toward me. I braced myself, unsure what version of her would appear. She stopped a few feet away. Her voice came out soft, unsteady. "I didn't know she posted those things," she said. "I didn't know she planned all of that." I nodded gently. "I believe you." "She told me you didn't want us here." Her voice cracked. "I was already so scared of losing my place in the family. I didn't want to be a burden. I let her speak for me because I was afraid I'd say the wrong thing." "You're not a burden," I said, "and you didn't deserve to be used as ammunition." Tears welled again, but these were quieter, more honest. "I'm sorry for all of this," she whispered. "I never meant to hurt Lily." "I know," I said, and I did know. Pain can twist people into shapes they don't recognize. But apology is a kind of returning, a step back toward the person they meant to be. She took a shaky breath, nodded, and stepped aside when Jenna approached. Jenna hugged me tightly, relief spilling from her like warmth from an opened window. "Thank you," she whispered, "for protecting us, for protecting her." I didn't answer right away. My eyes had drifted toward Lily, who was standing near the reception area with her little tiara askew, still holding her basket even though the petals were long gone. She looked lighter now, unburdened. That was enough. Later, at the reception, laughter returned to the air piece by piece. The music swelled. People danced. Children played under tables with crayons and half-eaten cupcakes. The heaviness of the ceremony dissolved into something softer, something that felt like healing in motion. I found a quiet moment near the back of the room, watching my son dance with his daughter, her small feet on top of his shoes, her dress twirling gently. I felt a warmth settle into my bones, a calm I hadn't tasted in months. Michael turned mid-spin and caught my eye. He mouthed, "Thank you." I smiled, a small, steady smile, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself. When I finally stepped outside for air, the evening light was fading. The sky glowed with the soft colors of dusk. I leaned against the railing, breathing in the cool breeze. Behind me, through the open doors, music drifted out, muffled but warm. The sound of a family recovering. My phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. But this time, it wasn't venom. Just 3 words. I shouldn't have. I read it once, then again, then slid the phone back into my purse without responding. Some doors close quietly. Some don't need to be opened again. I let the night settle around me. The porch light flickered once, then steadied, casting a gentle glow over the steps. I thought of the blue mixing bowl at home, sitting clean on the counter, its chipped rim catching light no matter how worn it became. Life had chipped me too, but I still held what mattered. And for the first time in a long while, I felt the shape of peace returning to me, soft and unhurried. If you've stayed with me through all of this, thank you. There are parts of a story that feel too heavy to carry alone, and somehow sharing them makes the load shift. If something in my journey echoed something in yours, you can tell me. I'll listen.